With nearly 6,000 satellites currently in orbit, Starlink holds the record for the largest satellite network in the world. While many consider it simply a way for a well-known billionaire to increase his fortune, top Chinese officials view Starlink as a serious national security threat. This perception recently led to an attack on the network, raising numerous unanswered questions. Why does China see Starlink as a threat, and how exactly was the attack carried out? Let's delve into China's recent assault on Starlink, as exposed by Elon Musk. On January 15, 2025, the South China Morning Post released a report that captured significant attention across the East. According to the article, Wu Yunhua, a leading Chinese astronautics expert, successfully simulated an operation involving fewer than 100 Chinese satellites, disabling nearly 2,000 Starlink satellites for more than 12 hours. The plan was so intricate and well executed that it was published in a Chinese academic journal. Given the growing attention to this strategy, it's no surprise Elon Musk addressed the issue publicly. Elon revealed that he's aware of the technologies being developed to target his satellites. While they may appear advanced but relatively harmless at first glance, he emphasized they are, in fact, powerful space-based weapons. These technologies include lasers and microwave systems specifically designed to strike satellites. However, the most alarming detail was that these systems are powered by a highly advanced binary AI algorithm modeled after the hunting techniques of whales. Just as whales trap fish in confined areas for easy capture, this AI is designed to maneuver Chinese satellites to strike multiple targets in one coordinated move. Wu Yunhua claims this strategy can be executed in under 2 minutes, with just 99 smaller satellites capable of disabling 1,500 Starlink units. This means that Elon's entire network of roughly 6,000 satellites could be neutralized within a day through 4 back-to-back strikes. Considering the scale of this threat, it's no wonder Musk has chosen to speak out, especially since he has repeatedly stated his desire to avoid conflict with China. Still, many argue that a clash between global powers is inevitable, comparing it to a modern-day Athens and Sparta. Despite Musk's peaceful intentions, Wu Yunhua and other top Chinese aerospace engineers appear determined to press forward. Late last year, both China and Russia began interfering with Starlink by jamming signals and launching frequent cyber attacks. Now, they're advancing to more sophisticated weaponry, including high-power microwave devices like the relativistic Cron amplifier and solid-state lasers. The South China Morning Post reported that, if executed, this plan could have already eliminated a large portion of Musk's satellite fleet. However, these technologies aren't without flaws. One major issue is that RKA amplifiers consume enormous amounts of energy to attack multiple satellites simultaneously, which leads to overheating. Once overheated, the systems need several hours to cool down, giving Musk a valuable window of time to respond, if he chooses to act. As the possibility of another attack looms, it raises a critical question about what might happen next. Why would anyone want to attack Starlink? In the West, most people see Elon Musk as someone simply trying to profit by launching satellites to expand internet access. However, Chinese authorities and experts view him as a potential threat. Their concerns span military security, technological dominance, control of information, and space management. While Starlink's network of over 6,000 satellites is designed for civilian use, mainly to provide reliable internet, it clearly has capabilities far beyond that. This became especially clear during the height of the war in Ukraine, where Starlink service gave Ukrainian forces a strategic advantage over Russian troops. This alone caused alarm among Chinese officials, who began to see Starlink as more than just a tech service. It led to internal discussions and simulations on how to dismantle the system. While Musk may have simply seen the Ukrainian military as another group of customers, the Chinese government interpreted his actions as taking sides in a foreign conflict. The Chinese military saw Starlink as a possible asset for the U.S. military, capable of aiding in intelligence sharing, reconnaissance, and secure communications. The lack of restrictions from the U.S. government further suggested, in China's eyes, that American interests did not include protecting Chinese concerns. Already locked in a space-related Cold War, the growing influence of private American space companies made it seem like China was falling behind in an area it once hoped to lead. This was a hard reality for a nation that prides itself on technological leadership. Adding to their concerns, Starlink has had repeated issues with cybersecurity. Numerous attacks have been carried out by ordinary hackers working from home. Over the years, top programmers have flagged vulnerabilities in the Starlink system. One of the most notable incidents happened on August 10, 2022, when Leonard Wouters, a programmer at KU Leuven, hacked his own Starlink terminal using code capable of breaching a satellite. Surprisingly, Wouters didn't have an elite academic background at the time. He was a self-taught coder who managed to expose a major flaw in the system. These terminals, which sit on rooftops to connect with nearby satellites, turned out to be less secure than expected. Wouters chose to present his findings at the Black Hat Security Conference, a renowned gathering for cybersecurity professionals and hackers. As reported by Wired, Wouters demonstrated how he disassembled a Starlink terminal on stage and installed a custom-built modification chip using just $25 worth of standard parts. Once connected to the dish, it bypassed all security measures in seconds, giving him unrestricted internet access without payment. The crowd was stunned by how simple the hack was, and Wouters successfully proved his point. He uploaded the code to GitHub and made it open source. Leonard believed the code was still in its early stages but could potentially be used to compromise the satellite itself. He also suggested that it was possible to build a system allowing him to communicate with the satellite, making things significantly easier for him. What made this situation particularly noteworthy was that Leonard had been warning Starlink about these vulnerabilities since early 2021, urging them to take action. According to him, the only response from Starlink was to make the process slightly more difficult. All it took for Leonard to bypass their changes was swapping out the mod chip, leaving the system just as exposed as before. He informed SpaceX engineers that the real solution would be to develop a new version of the main chip, as every terminal was affected. He emphasized that this was a hardware flaw, not something that could be resolved with a typical software update. While SpaceX claimed they were addressing the issue, it remains unclear whether their efforts were successful. It's also important to consider that China has long aimed for digital independence. With a private American company offering a service that could be highly attractive to Chinese consumers, Starlink is naturally viewed as a threat to their digital sovereignty. Foreign-controlled digital systems could easily circumvent China's strict state censorship and oversight. Given China's track record with data privacy, highlighted by apps like TikTok, it's understandable why they would not welcome Starlink satellites in their airspace. This concern became especially apparent in 2020 when rumors spread about TikTok being banned in the US. The Chinese parent company refused to change how it collected and handled user data, demonstrating how committed they were to maintaining control over information networks. Chinese authorities operate under rigid government regulations requiring full control of any data entering or leaving the country, including sensitive information from American users. Adding to the tension, Elon Musk's Starlink promises uncensored internet access, a bold proposition that runs directly counter to China's strict online censorship policies. As more Chinese citizens express interest in Starlink, it's no surprise the Chinese government views any progress as a potential threat. While Chinese authorities haven't publicly announced any plans to directly compete with Starlink, it's reasonable to believe they intend to launch thousands of satellites of their own. With both China and Starlink deploying large numbers of satellites, the issue of space congestion becomes more pressing. Currently, there are over 11,300 satellites orbiting Earth, and nearly 6,000 of them are part of the Starlink network. This raises legitimate concerns about one individual, an American citizen, controlling such a vast number of satellites. With many of these satellites orbiting close to Earth, future Chinese launches could risk collisions. The rising number of satellites poses challenges for future space missions. It's easy to imagine scenarios that could spark conflict. For instance, if China launches a satellite for military use and it accidentally collides with a US satellite, the incident could be misinterpreted. These concerns are compounded by the increasing reliance of the US Navy on Starlink, making the relationship between military operations and commercial space networks harder to disentangle. The boundary between Elon Musk's private network and the U.S. military is becoming increasingly unclear. Here's why. Starlink, much like a knife, can be a tool for good or harm, depending on who wields it. While it can be used to enhance communication during vital missions, growing concerns are surfacing about the military's heavy dependence on this privately owned technology. With Starlink now playing a key role in operations led by authorities known for employing extreme measures to maintain peace, what was originally an ordinary product for public use is now seen by some as a potential weapon. Starlink has become indispensable for U.S. soldiers deployed in remote regions without access to cell towers. In such areas, it's often their only link to fellow soldiers in command. The U.S. Navy was the first to test the system aboard its ships, aiming to improve connectivity for sailors at sea. Not only did it allow for constant operational updates, but it also enabled service members to stay in contact with their families. This trial, conducted in April 2023, was so effective that other military branches soon adopted the technology. The improved performance of soldiers, driven by the emotional boost of being able to speak with their families, was a pleasant surprise for senior officials. Aircraft Commander Dwight Eisenhower shared his experience using Starlink during a deployment in the Middle East that lasted over 9 months. He said the morale of his team was greatly improved by the ability to connect with loved ones after each mission, which gave them hope and motivation to endure even in the most dangerous situations. In addition to boosting morale, Starlink also streamlined administrative tasks. Given its effectiveness and the lack of any comparable communication systems from the U.S. government, relying on Starlink became the most practical solution. At this point, returning to older, less efficient methods would be too costly, both financially and operationally. Still, many people remain uneasy about the situation. Journalists have repeatedly sought answers from Pentagon officials regarding Elon Musk's influence within the Department of Defense, but there has been no official response. The issue escalated to the point where Senators Jack Reed and Jeanne Shaheen, both members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, formally requested investigations by the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense. They feared that Musk, as a businessman open to working with any client, could be negotiating exclusive deals with Russian entities. Their concerns didn't end there. They also wanted assurances that strict safeguards were in place to prevent such risks. In response, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin too launched an investigation into the matter in early December last year, and that process is still ongoing. Meanwhile, the situation has drawn attention from China, which has grown increasingly wary of how Starlink's expanding satellite network is becoming deeply embedded in U.S. military infrastructure. The integration is now so extensive that any large-scale disruption to Starlink satellites could severely impact military operations. The military's communication capabilities saw a major boost with the deployment of 6,000 Starlink satellites in orbit. This essentially meant the U.S. had 6,000 strategic assets hovering above every country, including China. As incredible as that sounds, even for a powerful nation like China, this scenario wouldn't have become reality without a key event that unfolded in early 2022, the invasion of Ukraine. On February 24, 2022, Russian forces invaded Ukraine. In an effort to block any external support, they destroyed local network infrastructure, cutting off internet access for large parts of the country. Shortly after the invasion began, Ukrainian officials reached out to SpaceX, asking for Starlink support. At the time, Elon Musk was hesitant to antagonize Russia, but as a businessman, he agreed to help. Within a week, thousands of Starlink units were shipped from SpaceX's headquarters and distributed across Ukraine, including to trusted government authorities. With a dependable communication network in place, Ukrainians quickly gained an advantage and managed to hold off the invaders for several months. Initially, Starlink access was limited to specific regions. 6 months later, Ukrainian authorities asked Musk to expand coverage to more areas, especially Crimea, which was key for launching counterattacks. However, Musk declined. This unexpected refusal led many to believe Elon wasn't truly supporting Ukraine, possibly because he wanted to avoid escalating tensions with Russia. Some even suspected he was cooperating with the enemy. But that wasn't the case. Musk had never offered support to any nation under U.S. sanctions. What most people didn't realize was that Chinese authorities were closely monitoring him, interpreting his support for Ukraine as siding against them. At the same time, public opinion in the U.S. was shifting. Many accused Elon of caring more about profits than people in need. This came after he had publicly stated his focus was strictly on selling his products, yet he was now being criticized from all directions for things he hadn't actually done. From that point through late 2024, Russian forces continually attempted to disrupt Starlink service. They used tactics like jamming radio signals and causing large-scale outages. Every time they tried to take the network down, SpaceX experts managed to restore it within days. It became a constant back and forth between Russian hackers and the SpaceX team. While their attacks failed, another threat was emerging: China. In April of last year, the Royal United Services Institute confirmed China's involvement. As events unfolded, it became apparent that the most recent cyber attack from China was not an isolated incident. Beginning in May, satellites began mysteriously shutting down for a few minutes before returning to normal. At first, SpaceX engineers assumed these were minor glitches affecting older satellites. But when newer satellites showed the same behavior just days later, it became obvious that they were facing a coordinated cyber attack. The big question was, where did it originate? It didn't match the way the Russians had been attacking the network for over 2 years, suggesting that those responsible were probably not part of the invaders. Without a clearer explanation, attention shifted to the next major country capable of such technology: China. Verified reports also indicate they have another alarming plan in the works, the Gong project. This initiative is part of China's strategy to launch a large constellation of satellites to provide internet services worldwide. Although it sounds similar to Starlink, closer examination reveals many differences. For one, it is a government-led project, meaning it is not owned or run by a private company. Instead, it's operated by the China Satellite Network Group, a state-owned firm. While its primary goal is to expand internet access, the Gong project also aims to offer better services than Starlink to Chinese citizens, reducing their dependence on foreign technologies while still operating globally. This approach allows China to match Starlink's capabilities while enforcing strict censorship rules. However, it is not a smaller venture. According to the latest statement from the China Satellite Network Group, they plan to launch 13,000 satellites, with 500 scheduled by December. In comparison, Starlink has nearly 6,000 satellites in orbit and plans to deploy over 40,000. To complement this, the Gong initiative will invite private companies and leading research institutions to collaborate on expanding the service beyond personal internet access. This suggests Gong could be used for disaster management, environmental monitoring, and scientific research. Whereas Starlink started as a private project with a focused goal, backed by public and military support, China's project appears to have a much broader scope. This raises concerns, as it shares some of the same issues China once criticized Starlink for. The U.S. has supported Elon Musk's growing network of potential weapons without fully considering the safety of other nations, prompting China to pursue its own agenda without regard for others. While the U.S. remains unclear about the line between Starlink's civilian and military uses, China's government-led project openly supports military objectives alongside healthcare, transport, research, and entertainment. Another critical concern is space congestion. With the number of satellites increasing each year, the risk of collisions grows. Currently, more than 11,300 satellites orbit Earth, and both countries plan to increase that number by over 400% by 2030. If left unchecked, within 5 years, repeated collisions could lead to the dreaded Kessler syndrome. This scenario occurs when Earth's orbit becomes so cluttered with debris that launching new spacecraft becomes too dangerous. With multiple nations competing without international regulations to limit satellite deployment, the risk escalates. If China succeeds in this plan, it could establish dominance over all space-based communications. What Russia failed to achieve during the Cold War might happen within 5 years, creating significant challenges for the global balance of power in space infrastructure. The only way to move forward would be to make Elon's dream of colonizing Mars a reality, but that itself is a complex topic for another video. Meanwhile, with over 10,000 satellites launched by China, we face an even bigger challenge. This challenge is known in physics as spectrum allocation. Simply put, most satellite communications rely on a vast range of radio waves, which must be divided into separate sections to prevent interference. We use radio waves on Earth too, but they're split for different devices. Some frequencies are for Wi-Fi, others for local TV, and others for cell phones. Different gadgets use different parts of the radio spectrum to avoid communication interference. This is so crucial that countries have strict regulations on which frequencies they can use. The problem arises when thousands of satellites try to communicate simultaneously just for internet services, potentially disrupting other satellites serving other vital functions. These other satellites support essential services like navigation, weather forecasts, and global communications. Without them functioning properly, having internet access becomes almost meaningless given how crucial these services are. Additionally, the environmental impact of so many satellites shouldn't be overlooked. Many forget that while satellites spend most of their time in space, eventually some will need to be decommissioned due to space congestion. Taking down a single satellite is expensive, and doing this for hundreds of defunct satellites is a massive challenge. Returning satellites to Earth poses its own dangers, such as falling debris that could strike populated areas like fiery meteors, risking lives and property. With over 50 Chinese satellites already launched and about 500 more expected by December, what strategy does Elon have to address this? Launching more satellites to compete with China isn't the best solution, especially considering all the issues mentioned. Elon, who cares deeply about the environment, is unlikely to pursue an aggressive satellite launch campaign. The likely scenario is a bit disappointing. It's doubtful that Elon, as CEO of several private companies, would try to directly compete with a government-backed project, especially one promising better service than his own. Considering his difficult history with Russia, it's probably wise for Elon to avoid escalating tensions by confronting the Chinese government, despite recent attacks on his satellites. Only time will reveal what the future holds for both sides. What do you think? Is China planning another attack? Should Elon continue expanding his satellite network? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, check out the next video on your screen, you're sure to enjoy it.